Hello, hello, hello. How are all my absolute favorite people doing today? Wonderful morning. Don't know about you, but I'm wired. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm just hoping to send any good vibes out your way today. Plus, today's my Saturday, and how could I be mad about that? I mean, life in general. Quick update. It's just on the up and up lately. Consistent anxiety medication is helping more than I ever thought it would. I highly recommend a doctor's visit. I hadn't been in years, and it was really starting to show. Plus, next week I'm going home to Minnesota to see my family. I feel very lucky about that. I don't mean to brag, but sometimes I kind of treat this intro more as a journal than anything. Because, again, don't know how to start this whole fucking thing. Another reason I'm excited today is all thanks to everyone who listens. I'm just about to hit 1,000 total listens or plays, which I know is very teensy tiny compared to most out there, but it's amazing to see, and I'm very happy that anyone would decide to click on this. So here's to you. Speaking of y'all, it turns out that just after the US, Germany takes second for my listeners' demographic. Honestly, I was very surprised, but ecstatic at the same time. I had no concept that, people in Germany would ever listen to me. So this episode is dedicated to all of you. My sources today are literally just Wikipedia and Murderpedia. I mean, that's not entirely my fault. The only other article I could find was literally an exact copy and paste of Wiki or vice versa. So I'm sorry, okay? First of all, what the fuck, Germany? I mean, props to you all. But how many GD serial killers do you have over there? I thought the US was fucked up when it came to murdering murderers. Like, I kid you not, I found so many stories I would love to do that I've never heard of. The classics from Germany, like the Dusseldorf Vampire or the Berlin Butcher. You hear those, but that's just the teensy little tip of the iceberg. For example, and these are just a few from this massive list that I encountered. Karl Denke, also known as the Cannibal of Münsterberg, responsible for dozens of murders and then would eat them. And then there's the Angel Maker of St. Pauli, who, quote, poisoned her grandchild and other children with morphine, burning their bodies in the stove afterward, end quote. Excuse me? Or how about, I think it's Johann Meyer, aka Stump Farm, nicknamed for losing his left arm as a child. And this kid, he grew up to kill multiple people, both men and women. But why stop there? Germany has multiple, quote, hammer killer murderers, multiple the strangler of insert place, and just a whole lot more cannibals sprinkled throughout history. Like cannibalism in Germany in the 18 and 1900s, that was a real thing. And let me remind you that all of those that I just mentioned, those are just before the 1980s. I could go on and on and on over the last 40 years as well. But I guess I just never realized what you guys held in terms of crazy people. I mean, besides Hitler. But I guess that's just my American ignorance at work, so my apologies. And with so many options to choose from, it took a while to land on this one. You may or may not have heard of this monster, but his name is Adolf Seefeldt, nicknamed the Sandman or Uncle TikTok, both of which are inherently creepy. I hate/love to start with such an aggressive story from Germany, so I have to issue a little trigger warning for child abuse and child murder for what we're about to get into. So, born in March of 1870, Not much is known about Seefeld's early life. The most I can find anywhere is a short 2 paragraphs worth of information. Born into a presumably religious family, he became quite the, quote, student of scripture, end quote, which typically does not bode well in these types of stories. It somehow always seems to get twisted from loving God to then hating and killing women. So, as the 7th and final child of his parents, there may not have been a watchful eye on him at all times, which lends a hand to the rumor about Seefeld's childhood that a few sources had marked in their notes. At around the age of 12, apparently he was molested by 2 older men, and although not officially proven true, this theory would tie directly into his future crimes and future victim profiles. So, in my very unprofessional opinion, I believe that this is Adolf Seefeld's, villain origin story, essentially. With no other mention of abuse or trauma, I have to believe that this occurred. As he grew, Seefeld first trained as a locksmith, and then he moved up the ranks into watchmaking and watch repair, with a focus on grandfather clocks and pocket watches. You know, those silly little clocks on a chain that are used by hypnotists in movies all the time. This would become his full-time and lifelong profession. So in 1980, at the age of 20, he moved to Lübeck, Germany, a bit northeast of Hamburg. Here, he married Katharina Seefeldt, with whom they had at least one known child. And again, his history here sort of goes dark for many years. The name Adolf Seefeldt is not mentioned for another 18 years until 1908. All of a sudden, Seefeldt was charged with the murder of a young boy, just kind of out of the blue. Unfortunately, he was acquitted of this crime due to lack of evidence, but if anything positive did come from this situation, at least he was on investigators' radar now. He wasn't completely invisible. So following the failed charge against him, his wife ended up divorcing Adolf 2 years later in 1910. And here it seems is when he really gave in to, you could call it, his desires. So now alone, he decides to take his work on the road as a traveling watchmaker, which in basically any other circumstance honestly sounds like a dream job to me. But for Seefeldt, it was more of a traveling nightmare. As elusive as he was on the road day to day, investigators did catch him a few times for child molestation over the next 24 years. So, just to briefly explain that, nothing, at least at the time, was good enough to put him away in prison for good. But after one of these arrests of child molestation, he was determined mentally unstable. And here he was sentenced to 2 years at a psych ward near Potsdam. And allegedly, at this psych ward, he didn't speak a single word the entirety of his stay. I mean, come on, dude. That's too much. It's so creepy. Basically a traveling salesperson, repair person, who just decided to quit talking for 2 years, cold turkey. So essentially, he was in and out of these just like jail cells, and they called them insane asylums for years and years and years. But everything changed in the year of 1933. And I don't think the word escalation really does this justice. And keep in mind, these are only the victims he eventually confesses to killing after his capture. This is most likely nowhere near the totality of his crimes. So 1933, 24 years after his first failed murder charge, Adolf has now graduated to killing boys. And when I say boys, I mean ages from 4 to 12 years old. Literal toddlers. Toddlers. So while keeping up his watchmaker appearance on the road, Seefeldt would lure children away, almost always into a nearby pine forest. Here, as he got them alone, it is unknown exactly what he would do to them. Some initial reports say he was using a homemade poison to knock the children unconscious. Other people have gone on to make wild speculations that he was hypnotizing these children with his silly little pocket watch. Doubtful, I say. But the most believable reasoning is that he was simply strangling the boys once he had them in private. Either way you slice it, the boys were brutally and cruelly murdered. So we definitely won't go into every murder. That would be too much. But in total, he did end up confessing to killing 12 boys. And I do, however, want to quickly highlight each one and when Adolf actually killed them, because it was in very, very quick succession. He went on a rampage. And before I start, I would just like to formally apologize for all the names and pronunciations I am about to butcher. So bear with me. All right, so this was all taken from Wikipedia. First victim, Kurt Nurk. He was killed on April 16th of 1933. Next, there was Wolfgang Metzdorf, who was killed on October 8th, 1933. Then we have Ernst Tesdorf on November 2nd of 1933, less than a month later. And then 10 days later, Alfred Pretorius on November 12th. Then he goes on like a 2-month break. Then we have Hans Korn on January 16th of 1934. And then following that, there's Gunther Tieski on October 2nd of 1934. So there he took according to him, he took a very long hiatus. But we all suspect there was a few more in there. Anyways, after that, 11-year-old Erwin Wisniewski was killed on October 8th, 6 days later. 4-year-old Arthur Dill and 5-year-old Edgar Dietrich were killed on February 16th of 1935. And then 10-year-old Heinz Zimmerman on February 23rd, 1935. And finally, 11-year-old Gustav Thomas on March 22nd, 1935. However, like I previously mentioned, the authorities assumed that the actual number of casualties was possibly nearing 100 lives, which is insanity. And the reasoning behind this theory of up to 100 possible victims is simply time. From his first failed charge in 1908 until his last confirmed kill in 1934 or 1935, 26 years have passed. You have to believe with almost certainty that he was killing prior to the 1930s, or at least prior to 1933. We all know he was abusing children without regard in those years. So who's to say he just wasn't killing them too? And we didn't find any of those bodies. But finally, after the police found the Zimmerman boy, Heinz Zimmerman, authorities arrested Seefeldt for they arrested him for the murder. Exactly how they put this together, I'm sorry to say I don't have that answer. But due to most of the boys, 11 out of the 12, in fact, all being found in pine forests, all wearing similar clothing, that of a sailor outfit, and they were all found in sleeping positions, investigators knew that Adolf had way more blood on his hands than just Heinz Zimmerman. Luckily, like I said before, he decided to just out himself almost immediately, confessing to the 12 murders above and remembering almost each one of their names, oddly enough. It was in custody, though, that Seefeldt told the police about his weird immoral compass, maybe you could call it that. So according to himself and one survivor, the boys that he would abuse and rape, he would let them live. But the ones that he killed, he would not touch other than to take their life. And this was actually corroborated by autopsy reports showing no signs of sexual abuse of the deceased victims. I don't get it. So I feel like going into every boy he would, I don't know, you could say choose, he knew ahead of time whether he was going to abuse them or kill them. Because you can't kind of do one without the other according to, I don't know. I don't know what was going on in his head, but whatever. It was during those autopsies that I mentioned that investigators decided to go with the strangulation theory rather than the homemade poison or hypnosis after all. Because during the autopsy of Gustav Thomas, the medical examiner Victor Muller noticed, quote, that due to microscopic examinations, the bloodshot pressure indicated strangulation, end quote. And he testified to strangulation as the cause of death in court during the trial, which ended up beginning in the winter of 1936 after his arrest, and was pretty one-sided to say the least. Only one day after closing arguments on February 21st, the jury sentenced Adolf Seefeldt, aka the Sandman, to death by guillotine. God, I love guillotines. What a wicked little toy. So the very next day, Uncle TikTok here, his head lay bleeding in a basket next to executioner Karl Groppler, who told people that Seefeldt seemed excited about his beheading. Like, ugh, that gives me the shivers. Would I still want to chop this fucker's head off if I knew he was going to like it? Pleasure and pain, baby. What an odd duo. But yeah, so that's the story of the Sandman serial killer of Germany. I'm sorry it wasn't longer today. This story obviously still holds so much mystery behind it. There has to be countless more victims. But oh well. At least I can say with certainty that I will be doing many more German-based killers in the near future. Y'all have so much to offer in that regard. If you have any recommendations, I would love to hear all of them. Also, question, do you like the 20-minute shorter or so format? Or would you prefer longer? Or maybe just better in general? Well, auf Wiedersehen, ich liebe dich. Or goodbye, I love you in German, I think. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I lost my V card to an Austrian lady. Not that that's the same country, but it's my closest connection, so... Okay, goodbye, love you, see you soon.